Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Dr. Yvonne Cason, the president of Spiritual Awakenings International. Welcome. Spiritual Awakenings International is truly an international network. We are delighted to have subscribers from 75 countries around the world. So please take a moment now and just type into the chat where you're joining us from today. We love to hear where you are. I'm joining you from Toronto, Canada. I know we've got some people in the audience from all over the United States and somebody, I think, from England. And let's see what other countries and places show up. Anyway, we are very happy today to be having a special Veterans, Military, and First Responders event. And we hold that every year in Spiritual Awakenings International to honor Veterans Day and Remembrance Day, which are both held in November. So it is my pleasure now to introduce the Vice President of Spiritual Awakenings International, Robert Baer, who will be introducing our very special speaker for today.
Thank you, Dr. Cason. And it is a special day and a special presentation. We're so grateful and lucky and fortunate to have Bill Vandenbush with us today to speak. He's a U.S. Army veteran. He had a life-changing near-death experience when seriously injured while serving as an infantry soldier during the war in Vietnam. Bill will tell us the story of the events leading up to his near-death experience on the battlefield, the events that caused the NDE, and some of the events in the aftermath of that NDE. Bill will also share stories of some of the additional STEs, spiritually transformative experiences, and additional NDEs he experienced after returning home from the war and the profound effect that these experiences have had on his life. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Bill and thank him for doing this presentation. Bill?
Hi. Thank you, Robert. That was a very nice introduction. I'm Bill Vandenbush, and I want to talk to you a little bit about my near-death experience in combat. But I wanted to say this before I start. Everything that I tell you today is based on my own personal experience and my own opinion of near-death experiences and the aftermath. So I don't want to quote a lot of other people, but I want to try to be as original as I can be. Anyway, when I was 18 years old, 17 actually, I started protesting the war in Vietnam. And it was, by the time I turned 18, I'd been doing this for a little while. And one day I realized that I didn't even know where Vietnam was or what this war was about. I wasn't even sure why we were protesting. But I thought the best way to find out and to educate myself was to join the military and go to Vietnam and see what it was about. And so I went down and I joined the military with a buddy, and we went through training, advanced training and basic training. And I went straight over to Vietnam. Now, my buddy, after basic training, he got leave and ended up going to truck driving school instead of infantry school. But I ended up in the infantry. Anyway, I was 18 years old when I arrived in Vietnam. It was extraordinarily frightening. I had no idea what to expect. My training had prepared me a little bit, but nothing can actually prepare you for that moment when you realize that you're in a combat zone and you're going to have to fight and somebody is trying to kill you. When we first arrived, we arrived in the middle of the night. It was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And we were in this little area, the debriefing area, getting ready to get on a bus and go to our unit. And I saw behind the area where we were sitting, there were some crates that had big, long tubes in them. And I asked the sergeant, I said, "Sergeant, what's in those tubes?" And he just looked me in the eye and deadpan said, "Dead bodies." And I thought, oh my God, I mean, there were thousands of them. And then he later told me, no, they were bombs that had just come in. So my introduction to Vietnam was pretty traumatic in itself. I went to my unit, and I was assigned to a combat unit, went out in the field. As soon as I got there, I met my two best friends, John and Hank. They weren't my best friends at the time, but became my best friends. And as we served together and got closer and went through a few combat experiences, we vowed that as long as we had each other's back and were there for each other, that we would survive this and get through it, and that we would make it home and everything would be okay. I was in combat for about 10 months when John and Hank went on R&R. So they left, but I didn't think much of it because we were on our way back to a base camp, and we were going to spend some time in a rear area, and I knew they'd be back in a week or so. So I was not terribly concerned, and we were probably, I don't know, maybe a few hundred yards from the base camp. We stopped to take a break, and the company commander called myself and a couple of the other squad leaders over and said, "There's been a helicopter shot down, and they want us to go get the crew and destroy all the gear on the copter." So I volunteered myself and some of my men, and we jumped on a helicopter, and they flew us to the area. And as soon as I got close to this combat area, this area where the helicopter was shot down, I said, something just doesn't feel right. This is of all the times that I've been in combat situations and all the times I've faced having to do the work of a combat soldier, this just didn't feel quite right. And as soon as we got off the helicopter, we started taking fire. And I got my men off the helicopter, and I got them spread out in front. And the company commander who was with us, he had all the medics and radios with him. And he said he was going to go around the other side of the hill, move around that direction, and that we would all meet up out in front where the downed helicopter was. And I thought, okay, that's great. So I got my men, spread them out. We were taking very heavy fire. And I stayed back a little bit in an indentation in the ground. I wasn't quite as covered up as they were. And I told them that that I would fire some tracer rounds so that they could see them, and I would see where the enemy fire was coming from, and they could just shoot towards my tracer rounds. So I did that, and I fired a few rounds, and we just seemed to get more and more incoming fire, and it seemed that we were surrounded by these enemy soldiers. And I assumed that they were North Vietnamese soldiers because they appeared to be well-armed and well-trained. NVA soldiers usually hit and run. These guys were standing and fighting. Within a few minutes of being in this battle and realizing that we were outnumbered, I heard jet planes coming, and I realized that the company commander had called in an airstrike. Now, this was not unusual, and I knew that the planes could drop the bombs or fire their machine guns and drive the enemy soldiers back so that we could get to the downed helicopter. But as they came over and they dropped their first load on the side of the hill, I realized that if they drop these bombs too early, they're going to drop right on my position. And because we were on the side of a hill, that if they dropped them earlier, they would hit lower on the hill. So I watched them go around the first time. They dropped their bombs. They hit near the top of the hill, and they were coming back. And I thought, oh, if they let these bombs go too early, I'm in deep trouble. And sure enough, I saw the bombs come down, and I realized they were coming down right on our position. I got down as low on the ground as I could, and the bombs went off. There was a big flash, and suddenly a large piece of shrapnel hit me in the face, in the right eye, hit me down the right side of my body. Little bits and pieces of shrapnel tore at my body. And I thought, oh man, this is the end. This is it. I've just been blown up. Here I am. I just turned 19 years old. I'm here all alone. No mom to kiss it and make it better. And I'm going to die right here, thousands and thousands of miles from home. I felt very lonely. I felt sad, but at the same time, I thought this is just my fate. I knew this could happen when I came to war. I knew that people got injured. I'd been injured a couple of times before, just minor injuries. But I knew that this was a bad one. There was a lot of blood gushing from my face. And I just thought that this is the end. And suddenly, while I was thinking about all the things that I hadn't experienced in life, I'd never really had a true relationship. I'd never been in love. I always wanted to be, a homeowner. I wanted to mow the lawn and have barbecues on the weekend. And I thought that now none of that is going to happen. None of the things that I wanted in my life were going to happen. It's going to end right here. And all of a sudden I was in this dark corridor, and I was just gliding forward, kind of in an upward motion. And I came out in this brilliant white light. It was the most brilliant light I had ever seen. And I suddenly felt no more pain, no more discomfort. I felt loved and cared for, an unconditional love, a love that I certainly had never experienced before. I sensed that I was in a very special place, and I didn't really understand it because a few minutes ago I was on the battlefield bleeding, lying on the ground and thinking I'm going to die. But here I am. I'm in this light. I'm feeling this warmth and this sense of all-knowing, this sense of unconditional love, a sense that everything's going to be all right, that no matter what happens, this is just a wonderful place to be. And I never imagined I could be in a place like that. And I saw this ball of light coming towards me, and I realized that I was also just a ball of light. I was no longer in my body. And this ball of light came to me, and I recognized it as my grandfather, as my father's father, who had died years ago, 5, 6 years prior to this. And I thought that's him. Even though he's a ball of light, I recognized him. I could sense that was him. And he said, essentially communicating with me telepathically, that everything was going to be all right, that I just needed to come with him and he would be my guide and take me into the light and show me around. And I thought, this is, it's strange, but it's wonderful. And I was still feeling all this joy and this happiness and this sense of unconditional love and understanding, knowledge of the universe, not so much academic knowledge, but a sense of greater being, a sense that I was connected to something much greater than I had ever been connected before. My grandfather was taking me into the light, and I saw another ball of light coming towards me. And I didn't recognize this light, but I knew that this was an authority figure. This was someone who had influence over me. I don't want to use the word power because there was never any power exerted, but influence. And this white light said that I was there for a purpose, that I wasn't going to be able to stay, that I would have to leave. That was disappointing because it was just an incredibly wonderful feeling, and I didn't want to leave that. But he said that I would have to go back where I came from, and that when it was my time, that I would return to the white light, and that may be many years. In the meantime, I'm going to have a long and productive life, that I'm going to survive whatever happens to me on this day, and that I will go on to do greater things. And I thought, well, this seems kind of odd. And he told me that I have a purpose in life, and that I would kind of instilled in me what that purpose was. But so much went on afterwards that I kind of forgot that, but it still came to me in bits and pieces later. Anyway, I turned around like a good soldier and marched back into the dark light, into the dark tunnel. And next thing I know, I'm back on the battlefield. I was still totally engulfed by this white light. It filled me. It felt like it was surrounding me and protecting me. And so I suddenly realized I had to do something. I had to get up and I had to get help. And I had to protect my men as well. So I told my men to stay down and stay where they were because they were in a protected area. And one of my men came crawling over to me, and I saw that he'd been shot in the front, and I took his pack off him, and he had a big hole in his back. And I rolled him over and I held him, and as I looked in his eyes, he took his last breath, and I saw this white steam rise up from his body. And I said to him telepathically, "You're going where I just came from, and this is, it's going to be a wonderful experience. So just let go, let it happen. I knew that he wasn't coming back. He was not going to come back like I did. And of course he didn't. And I laid him down and I covered him up. And as I began to get up off the ground and yell at my men again to stay put and that I was going to get some help, I started to get up off the ground. I'm still bleeding. I'm still very badly wounded. But as I turned to get up, I saw an enemy soldier probably 12 or 15 feet away, and he pointed his gun at me and opened up on full automatic. Everything kind of slowed down into slow motion. I was still engulfed by the white light. I saw the bullets come out of the gun, and I felt them go through my body, through my arm, my chest, my neck. And I knew that this was probably even worse than the injuries I already had. But the being in the white light told me that everything would be all right, that I would live, that I would survive, that I would go on from this. So I picked up my rifle and I fired back. I don't know if I hit that guy, but I'm sure I scared the heck out of him. Seeing me all bloodied and wounded and get up and shoot back, that had to be frightening. So I got up off the ground, even after being wounded again. I couldn't speak. The bullets had ripped my throat out, torn my chest open, torn my left arm almost completely off. And I got up and I walked about 100 yards to where the company commander was and where the medics were. And as I was walking, I was still engulfed by the white light, but now I could see 360 degrees around me. I could see all around. I could see where I was going. I walked through a hedgerow that was very thick, and I walked right through it. I have no idea how I did that, but I walked through. I could see all around. I could see where the company commander and the medics and all the other men were. And I walked straight to them. And as I came out of the bushes, several of the men ran over to me and the medics. And when they put their hands on me, I just gave in. I let go. I went down on the ground. And I could hear them yelling. I could hear them saying, you know, help me with this arm. Watch out. We've got to get an airway started. He can't breathe. And I had been, as I was walking towards them, in my state where I could see all around, I could also look at myself. And I could see inside of myself. And I was able to get air through the holes in my neck and down into my lungs so that my lungs wouldn't fill with blood. This was really unusual to me. And I thought, you know, I don't understand how this is happening, but it's happening. It's happening to me. This white light continued to engulf me. I realized when the medics were working on me that somehow I was going to survive. Somehow I was going to get through this day and the next weeks and months and years and be a productive human being. The medics finally loaded me on a medevac helicopter, and I heard some guy say as they were putting me on the helicopter, there goes one hardcore mother, you know. And I thought, I don't feel like that, but I feel grateful to still be alive. They took me to a field hospital, and they took me, they thought I was going to die. In fact, they toe tagged me, brought somebody in to identify my body, and kind of left me out in a hallway because I was the least likely to survive the surgeries, and there were other wounded that had to be cared for first. So when they were done taking care of the others, they came out. Somehow I was still alive. I was still breathing. I was lying on a gurney in a hallway. I remember that the two guys from my unit had come and looked at me, and I could see the look of horror on their face. And they said, yeah, that's him, that's Bill. But they took me back into the surgery. They stabilized me, and they said, we can't do much for him here. They put me on a helicopter, sent me to a bigger hospital in July. And we were actually in the little city of Duc Pho. And from there, basically the same thing. They looked at me, said they couldn't do much. They put me on a helicopter and sent me out to a hospital ship in Da Nang, in the Da Nang harbor. When I got to that hospital ship, I was feeling very uncomfortable, but I was still surrounded by the white light. I was still in that near-death experience. It was still happening around me. It was still guiding me and carrying me and keeping me alive. This room that I was in, this gurney I was sitting on, was cold and uncomfortable, and I asked the medic if I could sit up, and he said, yeah, I guess so. He said, I don't see why not. And so he helped me to sit up, and a few minutes later the doctor came in, and the doctor was looking at me sitting on his table, and he looked at me, and he looked at some pieces of paper he had in his hand, which I assumed were some of the records that they'd written up what had happened to me. And he was kind of pacing up and down in front of me and looking at me in this odd way. And he said, you shouldn't be here. He said, you shouldn't be here. And I thought, well, I'm here, man. Take care of me. And he did. And they all came, and the doctors and the nurses and the medics, and they took care of me. They operated on me. They put a trach tube in my neck so that I could breathe better. And I spent about almost a month in a hospital in Da Nang until I was stable enough to transport to Japan. I underwent a number of surgeries on the hospital ship and when I arrived in Japan. And during this time, I was still engulfed by the white light. I still felt this glow about me, this sense that all was well, even though all wasn't well. And I got to Japan, and they did some more surgeries, and I came down with malaria, which, because it was beyond the incubation period of being bit by a mosquito, I had to have gotten it from the blood transfusions. And so I was, again, in this life and death situation. And I never once feared that I was going to die. This sense of being engulfed by the light and being a part of that energy of the universe told me that everything was going to be okay, and I just had to ride it out. And I did. And I survived the malaria, not comfortably, but I survived. And when I was better and feeling much better, they had brought this guy in. It was late in the evening one night, and I was lying in my bed, and one of the nurses came over to me and said, tomorrow morning, would you kind of go over and just kind of be with this guy? He has similar injuries to yours, and just kind of let him know he's okay. He's going to be okay. And I said, sure, you know. Of course, I couldn't really talk. I would write notes, and sometimes I could put my finger on my trach tube and whisper a little bit, but I couldn't actually speak. And at the time, I didn't realize I had no vocal cords. The bullets had went right through my larynx, destroyed my vocal cords. I've had several otolaryngologists look down there, after I got home, and they said, sure enough, you don't have any vocal cords. So miracle number one, I can speak. And I don't have a trach tube. In the morning, when I woke up, I looked across the way and the bed was empty. And I asked the nurse what happened to that guy. I was going to go talk to him this morning. She said, well, he passed away in the night. And it made me realize how fragile life is and how fortunate I was to have this white light surrounding me and keeping me alive, because I knew at the time when I first saw this man come in that he was not surrounded by that light. He was not being kept alive by the light. But I'm sure that once he passed, he went there. After I was stable enough, I was put on an airplane and sent back to the States. I was in a military hospital for a while. And eventually they gave me a full retirement from the military, sent me to a VA hospital. All the while, doctors were telling me, well, you know, these injuries are very severe. We're going to have to install a permanent trach tube. You'll never be able to speak. We think we're going to have to amputate your left arm. That's my left arm. They said that your lifespan probably won't be very long. Pretty negative stuff all along. And I just didn't believe a word of it. I didn't believe a single word, because the white light, the spirit, was telling me something entirely different. Was telling me that I just have to survive day to day. I just have to make it. I have to find the strength to get through every single day. And that if I do that, every single day will be better than the previous day. So one day I went to the doctor in the VA hospital. I'd been there, been hospitalized for probably about 8 or 9 months now. And I was getting pretty sick and tired of the hospital. And I said to the doctor, what happens if I take this tube out of my throat? And he looked me in the face and he said, you die. And so my trach tube had a little ribbon around it, and I reached back and I untied the ribbon. I took the trach tube out of my neck, the whole thing, and I laid it on his desk. I stuck my finger in the hole and said, goodbye, I'm going home to die. Obviously, I didn't die. I went home. Now, this probably sounds like a foolish thing to do, to take this thing out. But it really wasn't as foolish as it sounds, because I'd been going down to the medical library and reading books about tracheotomies and what happens when you take them out and how they heal. And I knew that this would heal up on its own. The hole didn't need to be stitched up or closed up. I just needed to keep it covered, and that in a few days it would heal up. And it did. And I didn't go back to the hospital for a while. I did go back later to get plastic surgery on my face, and I had a few other operations to help me breathe a little bit better. But the doctors kept saying, well, you're not going to be able to speak. I went to a speech therapist. They said, well, you don't have any vocal cords. There's not much we can do with you. You're just not going to ever be able to talk. And I thought, well, that's just not true. The white light tells me I can. I can do whatever I need. I can survive. So it took me probably almost 10 years to learn to speak. And I started practicing right away. And over the years, I went to college. I got married, and I practiced and practiced and practiced. And I learned how to speak. It was nothing at first more than a whisper. But with practice, I learned how to make noise with my throat, how to manipulate that with my mouth, how to pass air through my throat and make these noises. And now I can speak to you. I can speak to you, hopefully, fairly plain. Obviously, my voice is unique and different. But I knew that Spirit was with me. That white light was with me. And I always had a fairly positive outlook on life, but I got divorced, and I had some career changes after I'd gone to college. And I took a job in Washington State. I'd grown up in Southern California. And I got laid off my job shortly after I moved to Washington State. And I thought, well, this is a chance for me to restart everything. And I was feeling like the white light was starting to leave me. It was starting to go away. I was feeling kind of down, and I was feeling hopeless. I was feeling like the light was fading away. I feel like I'd lost my way. I'd somehow stepped off my path and was having a hard time regaining it. And I was sitting, I had a little apartment in Renton, Washington. It was a little basement apartment. And I didn't have much furniture, just a few sticks of furniture. And I was sitting there in my apartment, and I heard a knock at the door. I thought, who the heck is that? And so I took a deep breath, and I went to the door and I opened it. And there was this little Asian lady standing there looking at me, and she says, Avon calling. And I thought, what the heck is the Avon lady doing standing at my door? Now, for those of you who are old enough to remember the Avon lady, they would come door to door and sell Avon products. I don't know if they still do that, but so I felt, that I should let her in. I don't know why. And she came in and she started telling me about Avon men's products, this whole new line of products that they had. And I was thinking, boy, I really want to get rid of this lady. I don't want this person in my life. And So I was just saying, yeah. And I said, okay, well, I'll buy one of those, but I don't have much money, so I just want one thing. And she said, okay. And she wrote it up real quick, and she realized that, I was depressed. I was feeling bad about myself, that um, things were not good here. And she said, my husband and I, we belong to a church right up the street. And we have a group there for single men and women that they can come and talk and meet people and socialize. And she said, you might want to come check it out sometime. And I thought, yeah, right. That's the last thing I do is want to go to church. And so I kept trying to brush her off, and she was being resistant. And she kept telling me then about this singles group. And she said, we have a retreat coming up next weekend. This might be a good thing for you. You could go there, meet some people. We do Bible study and all this. And I thought, that's not me. I'm not a religious person. I don't want to do Bible study. I don't want to talk to religious people. And I really, really don't want to go to church. But she was very insistent. And she said, well, I said, finally, okay, I'll come. I'll show up there next week and I'll go to your retreat. Fully intending not to, of course, being a man. And so she said it cost $35 for the whole weekend, which was a lot of money back then. This was like, this was back in the early 70s. And so I said, well, I don't have $35. And, so I probably can't go. And she looked at me and said, well, my husband and I offer scholarships, and we'd be glad to pay your way. I thought, man, now I'm trapped in this thing because, I can't take her money and then not go. So finally I said, okay, all right, I'll do this. And I thought I'll just go do it for the weekend, get it over with. And so she left, and I thought, I don't understand why this person came into my life. I've always had a sense that people that come into your life have meaning and value, and, there's some purpose behind this. So anyway, I went to the retreat the next weekend. I got on the bus. The people that were there were a little younger than me. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't really talk to them much. I said a few words and rode the bus. We went way up in the hills somewhere to this camp. And I got off the bus and we went to these cabins, and I found myself a bunk. And it was just about dinner time. I went to the mess hall, had dinner, and went straight back to my bunk. And I had this sense that, this is just an unusual place. I actually felt kind of good about being there, although I didn't really want to be there. So I went to sleep, and I woke up early the next morning. At the crack of dawn, and I got up, and I'm just going to go for a little walk. And I walked out. I walked up the road, and I came to this beautiful, absolutely gorgeous meadow surrounded by trees. And I thought, wow, this is spectacular. And there was a fallen log nearby, and I sat on the log, and as the morning mist came up from the meadow, I was watching, and suddenly a deer came walking out, and then a little baby came walking out behind it, and they stood in the meadow, and I thought, oh, this couldn't get any better. I mean, this is like a postcard. This is just gorgeous and fantastic. And the next thing I knew, I was back in the white light. I was right there. Everything was brilliant and white. The meadow was glowing. And I thought, now I know why I'm supposed to be here. This is another awakening. This was meant to be. And I was again filled with the white light. I was there. I was being told that I had a purpose in life, that I had to move on, that I had to carry on, that I needed to make changes in my life. So the light faded away and I was back in the meadow. Went back home a couple of days later. I didn't really participate in the retreat much, but I spent a lot of time thinking about this change that I had to make in life. And when I got back home, I started looking for a job because I'd been laid off my job. And I thought, well, change means getting a job and going back to work and supporting myself. So I went out interviewing, and I went to this job offer. I'd worked in the automotive industry, and I went to this job that was perfect for me. It was working in the automotive warehouse, and it was a kind of a semi management job. It was a supervisory job with opportunities to move up. And I thought, this is the perfect job for me. And so I went in, I interviewed with the boss, with the owner of the company, and we sat there and we talked, and I told him about all my qualifications, and he told me about the job. And just as we were wrapping it up, he looked at me and he said, Bill, don't you think you'd rather have a job in the social services? I thought, what in the heck is this guy talking about? Where did that come from? You know, I'm an automotive guy, you know. I'm not a social service guy. You know, how could that be? And so I thought about that for a while. And I went through a couple of other experiences that began to take me down this path to being a social scientist. Last thing in life I ever imagined I would be is a social worker. But the white light was with me, the spirit was with me, and it guided me and it carried me. And I got a job as an employment counselor. It was a fluke. Then a series of events took place, and I got fired from the job, but then I got rehired. But in the meantime, I went to work as a PTSD counselor at a vet center. Now, all I have is my education in the automotive industry, my degree in auto technology, and my experience in auto technology. How I kept getting these jobs as a counselor, I have no idea, but the Spirit was with me. The Spirit carried me. The Spirit took me to all the right places. I was back on my path. I was following my path. I ended up getting a job with the Veterans Administration, VA hospital, as a PTSD counselor. I went back to school, got a master's degree in social work, and worked for 20 years in the mental health profession. And I loved every minute of it. I knew I was on the right path. And I began during that time to understand, when I was originally in the white light, when I got injured in Vietnam, what that purpose that I was given was. And that it was threefold. First was to heal myself, and I did that. Secondly, it was to help others heal. And then eventually, I kept getting this message: you have to talk to the people and spread the word. And so when I was in college, this professor, I actually was the first time I told about my near-death experience, and the professor had come up afterwards and said, well, you had a near-death experience. That's what they call that. And that's the first time I'd ever heard that term. And this was the first time I talked about this. And the professor said, there's this lady in Seattle, and she runs this group for people who've had near-death experiences. You should go there and meet her. Her name is Kimberly Clark Sharp, and I think that she'd have some interesting things to say to you. And I thought, yeah, he gave me her phone number and all the information, and I thought, yeah, right. You know, typical guy. You know, I'm gonna say yeah, but never follow through. And so another year went by, and I thought, you know, I need to go do some things. And I went to the library, my local library, and there was a poster on the bulletin board. It said, International Association of Near-Death Studies meets here Saturdays. And I thought, this is what that professor was talking about. And I thought, well, maybe this is a sign that I should do this. And I was beginning to understand that I had to follow the Spirit. When the Spirit speaks, like showing me this poster for the professor telling me about this, things falling into place, it was important that I follow. So I went to the meeting, and it wasn't the meeting in Seattle. It was much smaller. There was about 6 people there, and I told my story, and the leader said, you need to go to Seattle and talk to Kimberly Clark Sharp. And I thought, oh, what the heck? How is this happening? So, of course, the next weekend I went to Seattle and I talked to Kimberly. And she asked me if I would like to speak that day. And I said, no, I just kind of want to sit and listen, you know, and pay attention to what's going on, kind of see what this is like. You know, this is all new to me. I've only told my story twice, once in college and once at this smaller group. Well, the room began to fill up. There was well over 100 people there. And I thought, oh, I'm glad I said I didn't want to get up in front of this crowd. And of course, Kimberly, being Kimberly, opened the meeting and immediately said, we have a new member here today, and I'd like to call him up here to tell his story. And I'm kind of looking around to see who it is. And she says, his name is Bill Vandenbush. Why did you do that to me? You know? So I thought, okay, I'm back in that place. I have to get up. And I told my story, and it went over really well. And I thought, this is what it's about. This is following the Spirit. This is being on my path. And now the Spirit is taking me to a place where I have to tell this story to people. I have to talk about it. And the next thing you know, I'm appearing on television. I'm speaking at conferences. I did this for like 7 or 8 years. I appeared on dozens of TV shows and went to different groups, veterans groups, church groups, all kinds of different groups, NDE groups. And I thought, this is part of my path. This is what I have to do. And eventually people said, you know, you have to write a book about this. And I thought, yeah, you know, one of my real weaknesses all through college was writing. I always got criticized on my writing. I was never a good writer. And I thought, I can't write a book. I don't know how to write a book. But then when I thought about it, I thought, well, if this many people are telling me this, then maybe the Spirit says I should write a book. So I sat down and started writing. I went through a lot of different problems and realized I was a terrible writer. So I had to learn to write. So I started studying about how to be a better writer, reading books, learning how to write. And the result was I wrote a book. This is not the first edition of this book. This is actually the second edition. And it took me a couple of years to write the book. And I knew that I was on the right path because the Spirit just guided me. Every time I hit a snag, Spirit was right there to take me to the next level. I took retirement from my VA job, early retirement, so that I could put all my effort into writing the book. And because Spirit said it's time to talk to bigger audience, time to move on and do something different. So I took my early retirement and moved on. In that process, I had gotten invited right before I retired. I got invited to a birthday party. A woman that I worked with, and she invited me to her birthday party, and she said, "There's somebody I think that you might like to meet there." And so I thought, yeah, all right. I don't really want to fix up. I'd not had a lot of luck with relationships, and having a near-death experience doesn't make your life perfect or great. It just guides you, and sometimes you walk down the wrong path, and you have to make changes and get back on. But anyway, I was at this birthday party, and I was introduced to this beautiful woman who I hit it off with right away, and I thought she's kind of a kindred spirit. And we went out a couple of times, and we talked about the book, and I let her read my manuscript, and she gave me a lot of good pointers about my writing and some critique on kind of what direction to take the book, and we became great friends, but it never seemed to go anywhere beyond that. We were wonderful friends, and we stayed friends for about 6 years. We talked on the phone frequently, occasionally met for dinner someplace. I really began to like this person more and more. But I had to put my energy into the book. So I began putting my energy in the book. And I thought, now I'm done with the book. I've done the writing. Now I got to go find a publisher. I sent out letters like every author does, and of course got dozens and dozens of rejections, like most authors do. And I had sent the manuscript out to a friend of mine, and I said, I want you to read this and critique it, and mark it up and send it back to me and let me know what you think, because I'm just not getting anywhere with these publishers and agents and things. So, I'm feeling like I'm still on the right path, and this guy was kind of a kindred spirit. He was an NDEer, and he read the manuscript, told me that it was great and that he wasn't going to send it back to me because he wanted to keep it and read it over and over again. I said, okay, that's fine. Just tell me what you think and or we should make change. And I said, okay. So he says, he calls me back about a week later and he says, I've been reading your book over and over. And he said, would you mind if I gave it to a publisher friend of mine? I said, well, no, I mean, that would be great. And he said, well, I did, and they want to publish your book. And I thought, the Spirit lives right here. Ask and you shall receive. So after all the rejections, without even trying, I got a publisher. And the book was published, and shortly after it was published, I married that woman that I'd been friends with for 6 years. And we've been married 19 years, I think now. And it's been maybe the most wonderful 19 years of my life. It's been delightful. I've followed the Spirit. She is a spiritual person, a Reiki master, and has helped to keep me on that path, to keep me from straying from that path. And it's just been an enlightening experience to have this relationship with her. So this Spirit, it takes us where we need to go. I've come to this revelation that throughout our life, we have many, many experiences, some good, some bad. But each of those experiences is enlightening. It brings us some little shred of enlightenment. And all that enlightenment that we get from living is what we take with us when we die. It's not the memories, it's not the actions, but it's the enlightenment that we take. We take that energy that we have. We take that spirit that we've carried with us through our life, and we take that with us to the other side. Life on the other side is good, but also it's really, really important that we live our human life as well. We can't just be a spirit. That'd be great. I could go up in the mountains, sit and meditate all day and be a spiritual person, but that's a pretty empty life. So I have to live every day as a human being. That means with all the problems, I have to pay bills and I have to eat and sleep and I have to watch television. But this Spirit, it takes us to wonderful places. And in the process of being a human, we develop the Spirit. It grows within us. It's important that we live this human life to its natural conclusion. Every time we take it away from that natural conclusion, we lose some of that enlightenment. Doesn't mean we don't get to go to the light or anything. It just means that we don't go to the light fully enlightened, which means that our growth in the light is stunted in a way that we have to learn new things and grow. I would like to entertain comments and questions if anybody has any.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for that absolutely incredible description of your experiences. Phenomenal. I'm now going to invite Brian Sackett, who is the Spiritual Awakenings International board member, to moderate the question and answer period. Brian.
Thank you, Yvonne. Boy, Bill, I was absolutely riveted, and it just was so real and so connected to your emotions and so humble that I really appreciate the opportunity to hear you. So there's a couple of questions that have come in so far. I want to ask one of my own first, which is,
Sure.
you had, I think Robert had mentioned in his introduction that you had the near-death experience, and then you had a number of other spiritually transformative experiences.
Yes.
So the coming into the white light again on the meadow at the church retreat sounds like one of those. But can you tell us maybe, anything that's happening now or in the last few years that you would categorize as that?
Sure, I can do that. There was a person that commented after reading my book that they were disappointed that I didn't talk in more detail about the near-death experience. And I told them the whole book is the near-death experience. It didn't end on the battlefield. It didn't end when I came back out of the white light. This experience, this near-death experience, I mean, it continues. It's with me every day. And my physical health has not been great in the last few years, the last 10 years or so. And I've actually been hospitalized and died in the hospital. I've had a couple of surgeries where they had to shock me and bring me back to life. And one in particular, I was very ill. I went into respiratory arrest. I had some infections. I had pneumonia. I had a number of things going on. And I needed some surgery. And so I had this respiratory arrest while I was in the hospital. And I was in a coma. And I was in a coma for probably a week or so. While I was in this coma, I had gone through the white light and out into the universe, farther than I'd ever gone before. And this trip into the universe was just absolutely spectacular. And the first thing I noticed was that the universe was teeming with life. It was like being on a Jacques Cousteau special and being underwater with all the fish swimming around you. You know, you just sense all that life and you know the coral and the seaweed and the fish and the water and all that. That's kind of what it felt like in the universe. And I understood that I could travel anywhere in the universe I wanted to go. I just had to kind of put it in my mind and it would take me, and it was just spectacular. I mean, it was just the most wonderful feeling. And I'm out there zooming around the universe, and I had this guide with me. And the guide was kind of teaching me how I could travel, how I could move from one place to another. He was talking to me about spiritual beings, and I was kind of getting some education on, you know, how the spirit moves from being energy in the universe to being living within a human body, existing within a human body, or any other living body. Spirit can enter any living body. And this guide said, is there anybody you'd like to talk to? And so I started thinking, you know, well, maybe a relative or somebody. And I thought, no, I want to talk to the person I idolized as a young man. And believe it or not, that was Leonardo da Vinci. And that's who I want to talk to. because this guy was incredibly brilliant, way, way, way beyond his time. And I mean, he invented helicopters and all kinds of different things, before any of this was even considered. And so the guide said, well, I can't introduce you to Da Vinci himself because he's dead, but I can introduce you to the spirit that inhabited his body. And I thought, well, that's great. That would be wonderful. And so he did. And the spirit of Da Vinci came to me and was a ball of light. And I was kind of a ball of light. And then this ball of light turned into a human form, said, I'm going to be a human form because that'll be more comfortable for you. And of course, then I became a human form as well. And we talked about the energy of the universe and how this energy inhabits all living things. It connects us all together. It's a part of every living thing throughout the universe, not just on Earth. Earth was just a tiny little speck. And I was so aware of how vast the universe is while I was out there, and how teeming with life it is, that we are not the only living beings in the universe. And I spoke to Da Vinci, and it was just a wonderful experience. It gave me insights into this connection we have, the spirit that we have, and the fact that all the enlightenment that Da Vinci got by all the things that he did, that's what he brought. That's what the spirit held. It held all that experience and enlightenment. And I was just thrilled. And then while I was there, in fact, while I'd been in this universe, I mentioned that my wife is a Reiki master. My wife was doing Reiki on me every day. She would come in and do Reiki and say, help me heal while I was in this coma. Every time she would do Reiki, wherever I was in the universe, there would be a red light come on, and I would be drawn to that red light, and it would draw me right back, and I could kind of look down and see myself in the bed and see my wife over me. But then I would go back out in the universe. Well, while I was talking to Da Vinci, the red light came on. And Da Vinci kind of said, you have to make decisions in life. You have to choose. And so the red light drew me back in, and I went right into the red light. And I'm looking into my hospital room, and there's doctors and nurses, and my wife is there. She's kind of standing over me, and I can hear them saying, Bill, can you wake up? Can you wake up? And I thought about it, and I realized that I have a choice. I can go back into that body, or I can stay out here in the universe, in this wonderful, wonderful universe. So I had promised my wife that I would stay with her for a very long time. So I knew that I had to go back and keep my promise. So I went back into my body, and there was no regret. And I woke up, and I was in that hospital, and the doctors kept telling me, well, you're going to have to be here for probably another couple of weeks. And my wife said, oh no, he's going to leave in a couple of days. He'll be just fine. And the doctor said, oh, no, that isn't going to happen. Well, a couple of days later, I was up out of bed walking around, and I left. And a few years later, I ended up hospitalized again. I had kind of a brief white light experience, but basically it was just taking me through saying, you're going to face a lot of adversity in the future. You're going to have to face a lot of physical problems, and you're going to move on with your life. Last year, I've probably faced the most difficult physical challenge, and that I got sick right at the beginning of the pandemic. I didn't have COVID, but I had some heart problems, and I had heart failure, liver failure, and kidney failure all at the same time. I ended up in the hospital. When I arrived at the hospital, the doctor called my wife and said, "You need to make final arrangements because he's just not going to make it through the night." And said, "There's not much we can do. We can't just make him comfortable. And we can set up a Zoom meeting," because she couldn't come to the hospital because of the COVID. And she said they can have a Zoom meeting and have herself and some of my friends say goodbye, and then that would be it. So I spent a couple of weeks in that hospital, and got up and walked out. I'm 73 years old. I had that first near-death experience in 1969, 53 years ago. And I'm still here, and I'm still with spirit. I'm still with the light. I still have guidance, regardless of what I do, what happens. And the spirit will keep me going. I have no idea how long. I hope that I can keep my promise to my wife and live a long and productive life with her. But there are no promises. There's just spirit.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. We have a few more questions, so I want to try and sneak in a question or two before we have to wrap up. Tim Hawk says how wonderful your talk was, and he wants to ask you, how do you feel about death now? Are you still regularly in contact with the spiritual dimension of life? I think you answered that, yes. What was the most important and the main lesson you think you've learned from your near-death experiences?
Good question. Yeah, like I said, the spirit is with me, the light is with me. It's there every day. But I have to live a human life. I have to live every day with all the frailties and the problems that we as humans face. I have to have money and eat and buy food and clothes and go out and socialize with people. So the spirit is with me. It carries me through the life. But the most important thing that I think that I've learned from all this is that there's a few things. Number one, that the essence of spirit and the energy of the universe is love. We have to love every living thing. It's a mandate. We got to love them. But we don't have to like them all. We have to have love. We have to have love in our heart and in our soul. We have to carry that love with us every day. We have to do our best to love people, even if we don't like them. There's a lot of people I don't like in this world. And there's a lot of things that I don't like in this world. Not crazy about mosquitoes, but I have to love the fact that they exist. I have to love the fact that they are living beings. So I carry that love with me. I try to demonstrate unconditional love when I can, but of course I'm not perfect. Sometimes I make mistakes. Life is hard. You know, I would like to tell you that life is easy, and if you believe in spirit and the afterlife and whatever, that there's a life after death, life will just go swimmingly. Everything will happen just fine. It won't. I can tell you that life is hard, and you're just gonna have to face it every day, and you try to find the best things you can. I like to take a little time every night just to spend time with myself and reassure myself that, you know, tomorrow is another day and I'll carry that spirit with me. You know, there's probably a ton of other lessons learned about how to interact with people, how to be a better person, you know, and I learn new lessons every day. I learn new lessons from spirit in everything that I do, and become more enlightened.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill. AJ has a question for you. He says your talk was wonderful. He wants to know, do you think the world is entering a new age of enlightenment, and that the rise of near-death experiences and spiritually transformative experiences is boosting this process?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I believe that those of us that are here right now, that what we're doing right now, talking about these experiences, we are the pioneers of this enlightenment. The world is entering a new phase of enlightenment, but like with all change comes chaos. We first must get through the chaos before we can embrace the change. And that goes for our spiritual world as well, and for enlightenment. We have to get through the chaos of the real world before we can enlighten the world. But each one of us has a story to tell, everyone. Whether you write a book or you talk on a show like this, or you go on a radio show or a podcast, or you just talk to friends. You know, even just keep a journal or a diary, some way of expressing yourself. It's important that we keep carrying on the message, that we keep talking about it, that we keep believing that we are the messenger, we are the pioneers. Okay, this change, this enlightenment probably isn't going to take place in my lifetime. I mean, my lifetime is almost done. And, you know, I'm out here trying to help people understand that by becoming enlightened, the world will be a better place. We will be better people. There will be more people we love and fewer we don't like. But I think it just starts with finding that love in your heart and talking about your own personal life and your own personal experience and your own personal beliefs.
Thank you, Bill. We'll wrap up the questions there. Thank you for an absolutely phenomenal presentation. I know lots of people will be watching this video to listen to your incredible story. Thank you.